Hi, welcome to Miss Anderson's English Corner. Today we're going to be looking at author's purpose, specifically at the art of persuasion and rhetorical triangle. If you will, at this time, pause this video and get your supplies. You're going to need paper, pencil, and a great attitude, and then we'll get started. We always start the lesson off with a quote from one of our greats. And today I picked a quote from John F. Kennedy, and he stated in 1962, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." The reason why this quote resonates with me is because I always feel that nothing good comes easy. And sometimes when we, step outside of our comfort zone, that's when we really grow. It's not easy to run 6 miles or to take a doctoral class, or even to face my greatest fear and go skydiving. But 2 years ago today, I did that. I faced my greatest fear and I went skydiving. It was very scary, but I'm an avid skydiver now. So I'd like to use my art of persuasion to talk you into going skydiving. Are you ready? Do you trust me? Maybe not quite yet, because that requires ethos. It requires you to be able to trust me. And maybe you don't quite yet, but by the end of this lesson, maybe you'll go skydiving with me the next time I go. Let's get started. Today we're going to be looking at author's purpose and rhetorical triangle. This is the art of persuasion. What are we going to be doing today? The student will use critical inquiry to analyze author's purpose. How? By applying the rhetorical triangle. That's the strategy, and I'm going to teach you that today. Why are we doing this? It's to gain a deeper understanding of the art of persuasion. Now, let's take a little bit closer look at some of the key vocabulary words that we're going to go over today. Persuasion. That means influence. If I can persuade my friends to go on a trip with me, then I have influence over them. They trust me and they go along with what I say. Ethos, I brought that word up a little bit earlier. That means expertise or credibility. You have to be able to trust someone. That's ethos. Pathos, pathos is a word meaning feeling or emotion. That's when the author's really trying to tug at your heartstrings. Then we've got logos, logic, reasoning. That includes stats and facts. Now let's go over another word, ethical. That means moral principles. It means we're trying to do better and be better all the time. Do the right thing. But then we also look at the vocabulary word unethical. That means that maybe we're only presenting facts on one side of a topic. We're withholding information. We could also look at that as maybe vicious gossip and rumors. It's not very ethical to talk about people, only give one side of an event. That's how we can remember the term unethical. We're going to be working with those words today. Now, before we get into the lesson, I do want to go over one more thing. Today's lesson on the proficiency scales is going to be at a level 3. What that means is, I hope today you can learn to identify or pick out the motivational appeals. That's all the lesson is going to be. However, when I get you to do the independent practice at the end of the lesson, not only are you going to be able to pick out which appeal it is, but you should be able to explain to me why it is that. That would be working at a level 4. When we're working at a level 3, we're 70% of the way there. When we're working at a level 4, that's 90% or higher. Now let's get into the lesson. Author's purpose and rhetorical triangle. When we write, we have to have a purpose, whether that's journaling for fun, or maybe it's an assigned essay from class. Maybe we just want to inform someone or explain something. Maybe we want to persuade. We must always, always consider the audience when you're writing or speaking. Some of the masters of persuasion, they could be considered some of the very best orators or speaker. They're always knowing better and trying to be better. John F. Kennedy, our former president, Nelson Mandela, President Barack Obama, and Martin Luther King Jr., just to name a few. Persuasion is an art. For thousands of years, great speakers have changed the minds of masses. They're so effective because they're so mindful of the rhetorical triangle. We've looked at rhetoric in a few lessons past, and we know that that definition is the art of effective speaking and writing. There are three motivational appeals in the rhetorical triangle, as summarized by Greek philosophist Aristotle thousands of years ago. Ethos, expertise or credibility. It's convincing another person based on the speaker's trustworthiness or character traits. If you're the expert on the topic, people are going to tend to believe you. He also summarized pathos or feelings, emotions. That's when we're convincing you because we're tugging at your heartstrings. And then there's logos or logic and reasoning. That's the facts. That's the statistics. Aristotle believed that to truly be an effective speaker and writer, you must use all three of these appeals. Now, when working with the rhetorical triangle, I always bring in a particular piece by Martin Luther King Jr., The Letter from Birmingham Jail. Now, we're not going to read the piece today because it's quite complex, and I would even consider it high school or college level. But let me give you some background so that I can tell you exactly how masterful Martin Luther King Jr. was at these three appeals. In April 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. was advised not to go to Birmingham, Alabama. At the time, there was much violence and unrest. But Martin Luther King Jr. was a part of the civil rights movement, and he knew that was exactly where he needed to be despite the threat against his life. He went there to try to promote peace, nonviolent protest, and while walking peacefully in the streets, he was arrested. He was placed in a jail cell and kept there for 11 days. He knew that he needed to appeal to the masses, but how was he going to do that? Because see, remember in 1963, not a lot of Americans had television. And even back then, the regular news channels, they would only carry the news for 15 minutes. But because of all of the civil unrest with the civil rights movement, that's when the standard 30-minute news came about, because there was just so much going on that they wanted to show. So as Americans were beginning to watch TV, it was still difficult to get the word out to the masses. And he was brilliant because he wrote a letter in jail to 8 clergymen. 8 clergymen in Alabama, trying to appeal to their senses, appeal to their emotion, their logic, and he, as the expert, wanted to be able to persuade them. When he was writing on sheets of toilet paper until finally a jailman brought him a newspaper, and he finished the letter of Birmingham Jail on the sides of the newspaper. It's a historical document today. In that, he was in jail and still quoting from the greats. He would quote by memory biblical passages, Socrates, Aristotle, Martin Luther, T.S. Eliot, and Thomas Jefferson. Now let me show you how Martin Luther King Jr. was effective in conveying his message in the rhetorical triangle. I would like for you now to take this opportunity to go ahead and pause your video. If you could write down and copy the anchor chart exactly on your paper. And I'll give you a minute to pause your screen, and then we'll be back. Okay, let's go over the rhetorical triangle. As we've covered earlier, we know that ethos is expertise, ethics, or credibility. Now let me go over some persuasive techniques. You either give expert testimonial, maybe you're trustworthy, or you're credible. And let me give you an example of that in the letter from Birmingham Jail from MLK. Initially, he starts out by saying, "Dear fellow clergymen." That could automatically be an appeal to ethos, because what is he saying? He's saying, I'm on the same level with you, so you should give me the same respect that you're expecting in return. We automatically start off with ethos. Then let's go down to logos. Logos is logic or reasoning. We're appealing through facts and stats. This is research and evidence. Some of the persuasive techniques, again, are factual information, statistics, claims based on general logic. Throughout the letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. is appealing to the logic of changing things for equality. He gives a lot of facts and statistics in this letter. Also now let's move to pathos. Pathos is the direct appeal to emotion, tugging at your heartstrings. And Martin Luther King Jr. was so effective at this. Pathos is feeling or emotion. It's what you're trying to convey to the audience, and maybe you're feeling it both as the reader and the audience. Some of the persuasive techniques we'll go over are fear-mongering, getting on a bandwagon, believing those rumors or gossip, glittery generalities, loaded words, or repetition. So as you can see, even with pathos, persuasion can be used for unethical means. That's going back to a vocabulary word that we went over earlier. MLK Jr. was a master at pathos because he talked about the pain and the suffering of the time, the inequalities and the social injustice. And he mastered the rhetorical triangle. Let's review what we've gone over today. We want to take a little bit closer look at our vocabulary words. Remember, we said that persuasion is influence. If I can persuade you, then I've influenced you. Hopefully you'll go skydiving with me. Hopefully I'm talking you into it. Ethos is expertise or credibility. It's trustworthiness. Do you trust the person that you're being influenced by? Pathos, the feeling or the emotion. Logos is logic or reasoning. That includes stats and facts. Ethical behavior is moral principles or trying to do the right thing, always. Unethical behavior is presenting facts, but only giving one side. Maybe you're gossiping or spreading rumors. That could be considered unethical. Now let's practice ethos, pathos, and logos. I'm gonna tell you a sentence, give you just a second, and then we're gonna decide if it's ethos, pathos, or logos. Here we go. The doctor insisted I go to the hospital. What do you think that is? If you said that it's ethos, you would be correct. I typically trust my doctor, and I would go to the hospital if he told me I needed to. Next one. At open mic night, I read my poetry, and there was not a dry eye in the house. What is that an appeal to? If you said pathos, that's right, because my poetry made everybody shed a tear. And last one, breathing pollutants can damage your lungs. I think that might be a fact. Which would make it? Yes, you're right, it's logos. Now, in your independent practice at the very end of the lesson, you're gonna see 3 pictures. And what I'd like for you to do in independent practice is pick between ethos, pathos, and logos in the picture displayed. Go a step further, because remember, if we pick it out or identify it, that's only a level 3 on the proficiency scale, or 70% of the way there. But we want to go further, deeper. We want to be able to explain it. So if you can say that that's ethos, you need to be able to tell me that it's because it's credibility or expertise. Logos is logic. Pathos is feeling. If you can explain that, then we're at a level 4 proficiency. Now let's end the lesson with one of the greats. Let's go back to MLK. He said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you for visiting Miss Anderson's English Corner.